Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Conversations. My name is Einav Avni, and I'm an alignment coach and energy healer. And this podcast is all about bringing messages of hope or information about healing yourself naturally. With this in mind, let's introduce our guest today, Dan Halpern. Dan, welcome. Really nice to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me on. So glad to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So before we get started, I'm going to read your bio so that we're all on the same page. So Dan Halpern is a trauma therapist, spiritual counselor, and somatic coach who helps self-aware adults step fully into their authenticity and potential. As a licensed professional counselor and lifelong spiritual practitioner, he bridges the gap between modern mental health and timeless wisdom. Dan guides clients through a process of finding safety, peace, and joy in their bodies, releasing stuck traumas from the past, and learning simple and easy to use tools to navigate stress and hardship while embodying one's higher self in grounded and practical ways, in gratitude and connection with the wider web of life. Fascinating. I'm really looking forward to understanding a little bit more about all of this. But maybe before we get started on that, tell us a little bit more about you.
Sure. Well, yeah, first just want to offer gratitude for you having me on to have this conversation. And also want to offer some gratitude to some of the other forces that enable me to be here, including my parents. Today is actually my mother's birthday, so happy birthday, Mom. And also my wife and daughter who support me to be here, and the encouragement and inspiration in my life. And also the lands that I'm on right now here in Colorado. This is unceded land of the Arapaho, Ute, and Cheyenne people. And I grew up on the land of the Wampanoag and Massachusetts people, Massachusetts in America. And yeah, all the forces that conspire the seen and unseen beings to enable this conversation to happen. I just want to offer some thanks for all of that. And yeah, something about me here. I am a trauma therapist, and that's in the state of Colorado. I also will just mention that I work with people all over the world as a somatic healer and spiritual counselor. And it's really a joy to, dig into some of that bio that you just read, especially around this notion of authenticity is something that is really important to me and to the work that I do. And could be seen as kind of the guiding path on which I support my clients to come into a space of more authenticity, which means coming through a whole journey of releasing old conditioning, releasing old patterns and ways of doing things that might have worked in the past that no longer work or support somebody's best interests in their life right now. Yeah, learning the tools and skills to be able to express what that authenticity is in a real, genuine, and embodied, present kind of way.
It's very interesting for me to hear what you're saying, thinking about some of my clients, and again, some of the conversations that I've been having with people. It feels like this is one of the most challenging thing. Like, first of all, how do you allow yourself to get back into this authenticity? And also, how do you find that courage to let go of everything that you've ever known about yourself, and how to step into that new version of yourself, which is, quite independent from anything that you've ever been. I guess it's quite a big thing that is fascinating me, but it's I'm curious, how do you lead or guide your clients through some of this?
Yeah, well, I like the language you used. I think you said to get back to that authenticity. It's because it's an interesting thing. As humans grow up in childhood, we will always choose belonging and social connection before we'll choose authenticity. Right? We are social creatures, and we develop in relationship. And that is the most important thing. Before being authentic, we have to connect. We have to get our needs met by caregivers. So we have to show up in a way that our caregivers will feed us and show us affection and attention. And that usually means squashing some aspects of our authentic selves so that we can be more agreeable to the people around us. So I think in the journey to becoming more authentic, to becoming a more well-defined version of our best selves, first we need to acknowledge the ways that we have maybe missed that or let go of that intelligently, so growing up to get our needs met. So just to make this a little more practical, as an example, maybe somebody really authentically likes to be explosive and expressive and emote very big, and maybe they were told growing up, quiet down, you're making too much noise, you're too much, you're too loud, it's not appropriate. And that child will learn to, okay, so in order to get love, in order to be accepted in my social setting, I need to shrink. I need to, make myself smaller. And not to make that wrong. That's intelligent. That's helpful.
That's what we call coping mechanisms, right? That's survival instincts and all of that. That's and the younger we are, the more ingrained it becomes, right? I mean, we really embody that the younger we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's interesting because, yes, you're right. Sometimes, these messages that come as verbal messages that we can hear, but sometimes it's really, people, the traumas, right? When we're being ignored or we're being neglected or abandoned or things like that we have to teach ourselves these lessons. And of course, that is part of the wisdom, but then you grow up, right? And it's all, you still have that with you. And this is now that, and that's part of the question of how do you go back to being authentic when you these lessons this was your safety. This was really about survival. You had to do that. So how do you unlearn that?
Yeah. Well, first it's appreciating what did those survival strategies enable us to do. What did that develop in us? Maybe we became really good at reading the room and knowing when is it safe to say something and when is it not. We might have become really good at tracking other people's emotions or facial features. Just getting that sidelong gaze from a classmate tells us, like you're saying, not explicitly, don't be like that, but implicitly we learn, oh, I should quiet that down. So we learn how to read the room better. Or maybe maybe you've learned how to have really good boundaries, and maybe those boundaries became aggressive or violent at some point. But what that violence is covering up underneath is just a need to say no, to say, I'm not okay with that. I need to protect myself. So I think there's a really important piece of not just saying, the ways that I have been showing up in my life don't work and they're bad and I should get rid of them, is saying, well, how did those ways of showing up serve me? How have they actually been helpful? And how do they maybe need just some finessing, some conversation to maybe lighten up a little bit, or use that strategy in certain situations, but not all the time. So like a lot of healing, I think, starts with just validating what are we already doing and where is the goodness inside of it. From there, and it is a process of upgrading and updating. Okay, so that strategy worked when I was 7 years old, going to school and having all these situations. Now that I'm a 30, 40, 50-year-old person at this point in my life, it's not as dangerous. The risks aren't as great to express yourself in the ways that maybe you weren't allowed to when you were younger, or that weren't as safe to when you were younger. So some part of us is actually, the title of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. We store all our life experiences in our body, and often we're interacting from that place of our past experiences. That's just like a contraction. It's stored somewhere inside of us and it's stuck. And we act from that place. We talk from that place. And so we need to actually come to a process of somatic release, of working with the body to let the impacts of our past experiences kind of move through and unstick themselves so that we can look around with our adult eyes, with our present day faculties and say, oh, I'm now this old and I am in this situation, and let's see, like, let's try it out and experiment. What's it like if I actually do try a new strategy and learn that, oh, it's safer now to do that. And actually it feels really good. And I'm actually getting maybe even some positive feedback from being more like myself. So I think there's a gradual process of first validating where we've come from and then recognizing where we are now and slowly trying new things out.
I definitely like this approach, and yes, validating, and I think that's actually one thing that is very hard for people to do in an interesting way, because I guess we tend to judge ourselves and be very black and white about, I've wasted my life, or people always say these kind of very big statements when they think about their past, and actually what you are saying is to say, actually pause for a second and let's look at the good things that come from here, and actually just by understanding. And I apologize if you can hear there's an outside gardener somewhere with a leaf blower or something. I never know when they come on, but they have a tendency to come in at the beginning of my podcast. They will go away in a minute, but
if we take this strength-based approach with what's going on right here, we can say, okay, this is something unfortunate that maybe the sound would be clearer and our lives might be better if that leaf blower wasn't going. And by the way, it's not so bad. But we can also say, well, what's it enabling us to do? What's the opportunity here? I mean, I'm honing my ears in a little bit closer and having, practice gating and filtering to be a bit more focused on what I want to be hearing. So yes, we can say that something that happens in life or in ourselves is undesirable or unfavorable. And there's always potential for something generative to happen from something we might want to get rid of.
I like that actually. That's we speak a lot about, things happen the way they are, and there's always good in every bad, and really actually just noticing your initial response to something has a lot of lessons to teach you. So there's, I like what you're saying, that actually, it doesn't have to be just unfavorable. There can be some opportunities here as well. But now I remember that there was something that was going with this before the blower thingy came, and I think it was about that giving ourselves a chance to see things as they are, not to judge ourselves so much, not to say, I can't change, or I don't know how to. But actually, what you're saying is, let's get started. Let's look at how it is that we are feeling. Let's see where it's starting, and let's now find a way to, of course, validating it is maybe the first step. But like you said, there's also some somatic exercises that you bring to the table to help bring that along. So what would that look like? How do we do that?
Yeah. The secret formula that I tell all my clients is awareness plus breath equals change. So that's the simple form. Then there's different things we can add on top of that. But we start just by awareness, noticing what's happening in the body. So you feel tension somewhere in the body. We might have some memory or some experience that brings up a feeling of disgust, maybe a pit in the stomach, or our palms get sweaty. Take a past trauma, and we notice that there's a lot of fear that comes up. Maybe it feels like a weight over our shoulders that is weighing us down and pressing us down. So once we notice what's happening on the sensation level in the body, that, it feels like pain in my shoulders or this pit in my stomach, whatever it is, then we can work with it. The emotions, the memories, the experiences become much more workable through the gateway, through the doorway of our physical sensations. So
Sorry, I was just going to ask. I mean, because do people always know to find this, where it is located, or because I know that a lot of the time people say I don't know, and I know that I don't know covers a lot of not wanting to go there. I definitely I'm aware of that, but how do you help them to really quieten down the fears and the resistance to be able to work with these things that you're saying?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to meet people where they are, for sure. And some
Mm.
people have that natural awareness of sensations, and maybe it comes very naturally to be able to say, oh, I feel a tingling in my arm, and I feel an expansiveness in my lungs. Some people can just kind of go there, but a lot of it takes menuing. We don't, most people in modern culture don't have that language to recognize what's happening in our sensations. So by menuing, I just mean kind of offering some ideas. Like, do you feel some sense of electricity? Do you feel a sense of solidity? Does some energy, when you're talking about it, does it feel more liquid, like waves, or more vaporous, like a cloud? And it's amazing. There is this thing called the inner sense of touch, is how some people refer to it, or the felt sense awareness. And like any sense perception, it takes time to develop.
Mm.
So some people might already come into a session and have that felt sense awareness very developed, and some people might have never heard of it and don't know that they exist below their neck. So it can take that time to just pause and breathe and notice. And one real simple practice that I find really helpful for this is to, like, if just right now, if we were to take a breath, and I'll invite you and anyone listening to take a breath and just notice what happens in your chest and in your belly, in your shoulders and in your back. You'll feel that there's movement.
Mm-hmm.
Typically with an inhale, your body might expand a little bit as your lungs increase. And then as you exhale, there's a contraction and your body comes back, like shrinks a little bit through that exhale. And so just tuning into that, noticing that our bodies are actually subtly moving, vibrating, shifting all the time. And especially when we talk about something that's maybe a bit more charged, more challenging, like an old pattern that we don't like, or a habit that we constantly do that we want to change, there might be a felt sense around that too. And so it's just slowing down and beginning to notice. And that's, it takes time to develop. So go at your own pace, and whatever you notice is good.
And that's also what we do when we want to ground, right? Because when you take a minute to breathe and to really notice, like you said, that there is a little bit more of you below the neck, then that you really you do ground, you slow down, you find more awareness and a little bit more calm. I'm curious about, I mean, some of the tools that you're mentioning, like this, the breathing and the noticing the sensation in the body. When someone is, finding themselves in a triggering situation where some of this trauma and fears and stuff coming up from the past. So when they're in a triggered situation, how do we? I mean, what are the tools to help them get into that pause, get into that grounding, get into the recognizing that actually they're just reacting to something, and they can try and respond instead? I know that we're jumping a little bit. We are jumping. I definitely feel that we are jumping. This is just a question that came up. I think it comes up because I have something that I noticed about myself yesterday, and that's why I wanted to share that. But I'll let you answer first, and then I'll get there.
Yeah, that's okay. I like time jumping. We can interview like a Tarantino film. Yeah. So the some of the, what we're talking about here, what you're asking about, is what I would call resourcing. Resourcing is anything we do that can help us to become more present, become more grounded, and more connected to ourselves. So when we're in a triggered state, what's usually happening is our reptilian brain, the brainstem, the back part of our brain that's exists, it's closer to our neck, to our spinal cord, that kind of takes control, and we get into this fight, flight, or freeze survival mode. And when that happens, it lights up, it fires so strongly that we don't actually have access to the prefrontal cortex, to the front of our head, to where we can make rational decisions. So the first thing to do is to notice that that's happening. And you can notice it just with this simple language around being charged. Like if you were to imagine jumping out of an airplane with a parachute on, that you might feel a 10 out of 10 on a scale of charge. If you're lying on a beach, you might feel a 1 out of 10. So just noticing when something's happening, to recognize, oh, in this moment, I'm feeling charged, I'm feeling triggered, I'm agitated. And it can feel like a charge. I like using that word because it does feel like an electrical impulse through the body, it can feel that way. So first is noticing that. And then, because once you notice that, then you can decide, do I want to keep feeling this way? There's a little bit of agency once you notice that I am feeling this way. Then you are separating yourself from the experience. And in that, then you can apply some of these different resourcing interventions, these tools and practices to shift out of that charge, or kind of down regulate or downshift. So the different things are helpful for that. I have a whole online course actually that goes through all of this. It's called Feel Good. And the course kind of goes through and in a whole menu of different categories and different practices. But one common theme throughout different kinds of resourcing practices is just becoming more present. So one simple way is to look around yourself and just find 3 things that are the color green or the color yellow. You can also, maybe with the leaf blower, we can work with sound and just notice what's the closest sound you can hear to your body? What's the furthest sound, furthest away from your body that you can hear? What that does is it just puts you more into your place right now. Because when that fight or flight thing is coming on, we're not usually present. We're thinking about something that happened before, or something that might happen in the future, or we're just in that, the fear and the concern about what's happening more than we're actually with what's happening. So coming back to the present moment actually can bring a lot of safety. And something else that's helpful is to just look around yourself and connect with something that you like seeing, like just looking out the window, finding the nearest tree, finding a cloud, looking at a painting on the wall, looking at a photograph on your phone. Different senses, you can hold something, just pick up a rock and feel the density and the heaviness of it. What it does is it brings you more down from the head, more into the body, or more into your environment, more into where you are. And different practices, again, to help with that. You can also use the imagination as a huge one to, if you're able to, if you need to go to a bathroom stall where you have some privacy, or, if you're wherever you are, to just take a moment and close your eyes and think about something that brings a sense of relief. Maybe it's thinking about a pet, or thinking about a person in your life, or a teacher, or even a television character or a video game character. Whatever it is that brings a sense of relief, or a place in nature that you love, a special tree that you used to climb. Thinking about something that when you go there, it brings a little bit of relief. And that little bit of relief is no small thing. That little bit of relief is an opening, a wedge into that traumatized state that says we can do something different. We can start to shift from there with just, even if your level of charge goes from an 8 to a 7, well, there's a downward movement there. We can follow that. We can keep breathing into that 7. You can keep breathing into the relief that you feel, the fuller breath that comes when you imagine floating down the river, or sitting on the beach, or climbing that mountain. So there's a lot of different practices. One other simple one that I use a lot that I love is just splashing cold water on your face, standing up and walking around, pushing against a wall, just coming back into your body. And often if we feel stuck mentally or emotionally, bringing in physical movement is a great way to become unstuck.
I like what you're saying, because it really, as you were talking about it, I could feel it, that they're really, we're coming out of a state. you know, when you get triggered, when you get charged, like you say, right, you're staying at the lower part, this reptile brain stuff. You are responding, or I think reacting is probably a better word. You're reacting to a trigger, and now you are in that state, really in a place that maybe you don't feel like you have any control over anything, and you maybe, like you said, you're not focusing on what is happening right here. You're actually reacting to something else, and I guess that's part of what PTSD is all about. It's that bringing back triggering from before. But what I'm hearing from you is that when you do that, first of all, when you have this awareness and you're noticing that you are now in that charge or this trigger, you actually have a choice. And already by saying, actually, hang on, let me just hold on, let me pause, let me gather myself. In that time, you're already disconnecting from that charge, from that trigger, and already you're bringing in. Now you go up into that, upper parts of your brain, and you can start making sense of things. And I really like all of these things that you've already mentioned, because that's the only thing that we really need, right? We only need a split second of changing a decision. I think there's a book that was very popular a few years ago, the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, or something like that. And this guy was talking about this. Before you make any kind of decision, you have a split second to decide if you want to go left or right. And this is, it feels like it's doing this here as well, because you're moving away from this automatic reaction to now more calculated response. And all of these tools that you mentioned, they're very helpful, because they help you to get back into that feeling that you have control over the situation, or how you respond to something. I guess I just explained it to myself in a way that, using my words, but I really like what you just said.
Can I add something there to that too?
Yeah, of course.
Well, I think that you're right, that it can be that split second of choice to say, I want to shift out of this. But that moment of choice is happening all the time. And I want to emphasize that, because sometimes we might feel angry or sad or really charged, and we're not ready to let go of that. It's actually doing something for us. And, we might need to feel righteously angry for a long time before we're willing to have a conversation with that person in our life. Need to feel victimized and feel depressed and sad and say, I'm stuck. Even while we're recognizing that I could choose something different, sometimes we just need to move through some contracted emotion or some contracted space for as long as we need to. And, the amazing thing about life, I find, and this is why I can do what I do, is that I believe that life wants to heal. Okay, it's the most amazing thing. I mean, I'm still utterly baffled by the fact that if I get a paper cut, my skin will reconnect. It'll go into construction mode and it will repair itself. I once took a little bit of my thumb off in a door, and my thumb built itself back.
Yeah.
I mean, that blows my mind. It's insane that our bodies want to come back to wholeness, that we want to come back to health.
Yeah.
It's like the waters want to move and keep cleansing and keep clearing the gunk and the junk out of the way. And all we have to do is we in our mind have to get out of the way to allow that to happen. And sometimes we're not ready to. Sometimes we're still holding on, and we still need to feel bad. We still need to feel contracted for however long we need to. And then once we're ready to, then there is a current to life that we just have to allow ourselves to flow with, that wants to move towards healing and move towards more ease in our lives. And, it's always available to us. So it can be a split-second choice to jump in, and we can make that choice, and we do have to make that choice again and again and again as our old patterns keep coming back and choosing how we live.
And I think that's important. It's important to remind ourselves that it is a choice that we need to make again and again. Because, in my work, right, with the emotion code, for example, we always say that an emotion would come in, and then it peaks, and then it takes 90 seconds later, it's out of the body. So it really is that easy. But if you get cut off in a traffic thingy, and then you get angry, and your anger lasts more than 90 seconds, then you need to ask yourself why. How come? What is it? What are the benefits? What is it bringing me? But what you're saying, I don't know. It just feels so important to give this more space, because it is exactly that. We need to be willing to let that go. And so often we're not, right? We keep on to anger, we keep on to upset, and I like what you say, even this feeling righteousness is, it's that thing of, I see that a lot with my clients, that it's the injustice, especially when they're so young, and they've been through so many terrible things. They don't want to let that go, because part of them still is waiting for justice. They need to be aware. They need to say sorry. They need to know what they've done to us. And so I think what I want to ask is really, how do we get past that? How do we bring that? Because I agree also, like you said, right? We innately we want to heal. How do we bring this together so that our conscious mind and subconscious mind all align, and say, actually, it is better for us to let go, process the emotion, and heal.
Yeah. So I want to try to weave a couple things from this conversation in here, because it very much is all related to the childhood aspects of things, to the current things. And first, I think it's important to recognize that when an emotion feels like it's not moving and it's really stuck, it's worth checking how much are we feeling the emotion, and how much are we feeling our resistance to trying to hold back that emotion, to let ourselves feel it. I hear this a lot, that it's, and feel this sometimes too, that if I let myself feel that pain, it'll consume me and I won't be able to come back from it. It'll be too much. And so we, again, intelligently don't let ourselves feel that, because it feels too overwhelming. And there's some truth to that if we don't have the capacity to tolerate that charge in our nervous system, then it could be too much. It could be dysregulating. So it's important to build up a bit more resilience in our bodies to be able to tolerate charge. And sometimes I call that's what we're doing in the counseling sessions that I hold, is it's kind of like a nervous system gym. We're just building our capacity to tolerate the charge in the nervous system. To say, I don't like this thing, and I'm not going to change it right away. I'm just going to feel the impact of it. So we might be feeling a very strong anger or a triggered state in our life. And maybe, I don't know, maybe 30% of us is feeling that trigger, and maybe more like 70% of us is feeling our resistance to feeling that trigger. It's like most of us were feeling how intense it is to put our shoulders against the door and say, don't come in, you're not allowed in. And once there's enough safety to actually feel the impact of the pain, if somebody cuts us off in traffic, that hurts. That hurts my feelings. It doesn't feel good. I feel affronted. I feel kind of like there's been a little bit of a violation. Someone came into my lane too close to my car.
Yeah.
So it can feel like a violation. And oftentimes I think what we feel when that doesn't go away is that we're feeling that I don't like that and I don't accept that happened. And the alternative is to say, I don't like that happened, and I'm going to let myself feel the pain of that. I'm going to feel the hurt of how rude it was and how scary it was when that person did that. And once you feel that more primary emotion, whereas the resistance might be more of a secondary emotion, actually feeling the direct impact in yourself, really contacting yourself and feeling the impact of it, that's when the emotions have that 90-second timeline. And they actually do move through pretty quickly when we're not resisting it. And we feel, ow, it really hurts. Ow, ow. my 4-year-old daughter is an amazing example of this. She there have been times in her life already when she, stubs her toe or bites her tongue, has an owie, and just cries. And my wife and I will just let her cry and hold her and say, that really hurts. That's so painful. She'll cry and she'll cry, and then she'll look up at us and say, I'm all done crying. And she goes off and plays.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just need to let ourselves feel the impact. I've had a pretty profound experience with this recently with self-forgiveness. Excuse me. Had made a mistake with some paperwork, and it created a whole bunch of stress. And it was resolved, but there was a time that I was really upset with myself for having made a mistake. And I stepped outside and I said, okay, I'm kind of stuck in this emotion. So I went on a walk. It's a great thing to do, a great way to resource and just shift out of stuck emotional space. And on that walk, I just let myself feel all the pain of what I was holding a grudge against myself for. And I let myself feel that, okay, I made a real mistake, and I created more hassle and more grievances and more stress because of this thing that I did. And I'm not okay with that, but it happened. And I let myself feel the impact of that. And then through that acceptance, I came to a place just by breathing into that for less than a minute, really, of, okay, so now this is the situation. What do I do now? And again, it became more workable because I was able to be present with what was actually happening, not my resistance to it, not my ideas or my story or judgment about it, my blame, guilt, or shame about it. Just being able to feel like, wow, this is a contraction. It's a sadness. It feels like, I feel like myself shrinking. I feel I'm not taking as full of a breath in my chest. And then once I could do that and I could feel it, then it lessened, it dissipated. And that will always happen if we have the space to allow that to happen.
And I think that's also because we're no longer just reacting to it, right? It's that we say, okay, I'm willing to go in there and explore more. And I think in anything that we're not reacting to, we have a different relationship with that. So I like this reminder. I like this reminder a lot. And also I think bring that thought of about how the fear of feeling the emotion is also it's keeping us more stuck. And if we can tie this into all of this, the topics of chronic pain and chronic illnesses, because we know that the more stress that we have or that we experience, the more that we can't let go of illnesses and pain and stuff like that. And actually what you're saying is part of that, because all of this withholding, whichever way is the right grammar, is impacting the body, right? Because we are in resistance, we are in holding our breath, we're not allowing ourselves to go through it and express it, to release it. So I want to talk a little bit more specifically about PTSD, because when I was sharing about this conversation, up and coming conversation, some people were very interested about PTSD and how to what are some steps that they maybe can do. How do we move it from something that is so overwhelming and again reactive to something that we can do something about? I guess some of the things that you already shared would be very helpful with that, because if you are in awareness, like we said earlier, then now you have a choice. But I'll give you the stage.
Yeah. So when there is an intense trauma, or even a series of small traumas, like just consistent neglect or not being noticed or recognized, it can build up in the body for sure, and it feels overwhelming to get out of, and it feels like there's no path out. the first most important thing to do at that point is to create a little bit of an alternative story. So that's why so this course, this notion of resourcing is so helpful. And the reason that I named this online course Feel Good, it's because it's so important to be able to come back to a space of some safety, or even if good isn't available, neutral, just shifting a little bit of the way. Because then there's an opening for something to change. So when there's intense trauma and we're in that space of PTSD, we're stuck, still reacting overly, not appropriate to the current situations in our lives because we're still coming from that traumatized space. The first thing is to find some resource, find some safety. This is the foundation for any kind of healing work, to find a place in your body or in your memory or in your imagination or in your environment that brings a sense of relief. So again, some of those resourcing practices, something around yourself you can see, something you can imagine, a place or a person that brings a sense of peace. Maybe finding a place in your body, like maybe you're feeling triggered and traumatized and frazzled and like your mind is a tornado, but maybe if you bring your awareness down to your feet and feel where your feet are making contact with the earth, that actually feels pretty solid and grounded. So you can come back down there and take some breaths into the solidity there. So as we build that foundation of peace, doing a meditation where you, go to that safe place, to a place in nature that you grew up in, and breathe into that space for 5 or 10 minutes. And remember the smells and the feeling of the sun on your skin. It creates something different in your body where there is a bit more safety there. Then from that place, then we can start to do the work of reprocessing the trauma. So it really is fundamental. If we just went into, talk therapy and said, well, tell me about the trauma, tell me about the worst thing that happened to you, there's not going to be safety. It will likely be re-traumatizing. Instead, we need to... What's that?
That is the first statement, yes.
It is okay to talk about the trauma, but there needs to be that sense of safety to be able to contain it so that we don't just go back into that space of fight or flight. So first we establish safety by letting ourselves feel good or neutral, with a different resourcing practice. It can be box breathing or taking different breaths into the body, just feeling the chair underneath you and letting yourself relax or recline and letting yourself be supported by the chair. That's amazing to feel that support, that the earth and the furniture underneath us can hold us up. We don't need to hold our bodies with so much tension. We can let the chair hold us for us. So we come to some way of coming to a bit more peace, a bit more goodness, a bit more safety and relief in our system. Then from there, we can start to talk about the outer edges of the trauma. And this is where having a trauma therapist is so helpful, because what a skilled trauma therapist would be doing is finding the edge of the trauma, finding that golden layer where you can talk about it and feel what you need to feel without getting overwhelmed or dissociating. So it's kind of like if you're ever getting a massage and the pressure is too much, you might hold your breath until the masseuse or the masseur is done pressing into you that hard. If we're holding our breath, we're not really going to feel the much shift or changing in us. It's kind of just we're getting through it and tensing. So in trauma therapy too, we want to find that golden layer where we can still breathe fully into the pressure, and we can allow that pressure to become unknotted. And sometimes that happens just by talking about it and being able to say, this happened to me. and then it's spoken out and it leaves the body a little bit that way. Sometimes we need to shake physically. This is what wild animals do. If they're being hunted and running, once they're back to freedom, their bodies will shake. And sometimes our human bodies also need to just shake and release. We can, make ourselves do that. We can jump around and dance and move. Sometimes emotions release through tears or laughter or gas even, or yawns. Yawning can actually be a great sign that we're opening up more space in our bodies and something is leaving. So first, again, to walk through the steps, first feeling a sense of safety, feeling some sense of goodness and relief in our body, and then little by little leaning into the pain and the sensations of the trauma. And it's like an onion, layer by layer. First the shock of the experience can lessen, then the pain of it, then the kind of the righteous indignation can come through, and it's it's an ongoing process. Again, there's maybe many layers to it, and you might come to a sense of peace with it, and then 5 years later something else might come up that reveals a new layer and says, oh, I'm still really pissed about this thing that happened. And then it's time to integrate that anger and work with that in different ways.
Yesterday, or was actually last night, I was driving with my younger daughter somewhere, and we like to just basically go we don't have to know the way. We're not going anywhere in particular. We like to get lost basically. And it was night, so it was dark, and I took this turn, and all of a sudden it was kind of a posh area of that town, and all of a sudden there was the road just ended. It was maybe a forest at the end of it, and the first thing that we said was like, oh wow, it's imagine living here. And it was very interesting because my daughter said, imagine living here, and I could hear that there was actually, it was a quite nice thing to do, you in the middle of nowhere, just by the forest and all that. And I said yes, and then immediately I was like, actually I don't think I'll be able to live here, because although I like to think of myself, that I prefer to live in the middle of nowhere, I wouldn't be able to, because, and this is where this, I don't know, trauma, the PTSD, I don't know, it came back. And this is something that, of course, I know that it's something in my childhood of not being able to feel safe. But it's very much around, I'm not sure actually what it's about. But it was interesting for me that actually I was able to feel the feeling, and actually I'm not sure I know where it started from. I mean, I have some guests of not feeling safe in my childhood, but actually what you were saying here with the steps and the resourcing and everything, it made me realize that maybe the first step, which is not something that I was doing, I mean, it wasn't, it was just a thought, so I could let it go, and it didn't have a big hold of me. But I can imagine that what you were saying is actually to say, first of all, you are feeling this, but we don't want to go down that route. We want to go back into our senses and into our bodies, and actually, feel better. And then slowly we can do, when you say reprocessing, the other word that came to my mind, I don't know if that's something that you do as well, or that I'm right in this instance, but is to basically start to reprogramming, to find the safety in the environment. So instead of our brain, noticing it and going back to where we've always been, we're now starting to rewire our brains so that we bring safety over fear, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A magic statement, a spell, or a sentence you can use is to say, that was a terrible thing that happened to me, and now I'm safe. And if you're not safe, if you're still in a relationship or a situation that still doesn't feel safe, then it's so important to find some of that safety. Either it's maybe a place in your body, maybe it's through resourcing, maybe it's with a friend or a confidant or a counselor or a spiritual teacher, or somebody in your life that, or even with your pets, with your animals, that was a terrible thing that's happening, and I can feel more safety, and I know that's possible, and I can let myself start to move towards more of that. And it might mean changing major life situations, relationships, or living where you're living or working. Sometimes that's also part of healing, is really changing our lives. But recognizing if it was something that happened in the past, saying that was a terrible thing that happened and I survived. It's a profound, sometimes hard thing to come to, but that is reprogramming, and it's updating the software and saying, okay, that was a virus I went through. Now I'm not there. Like, even like physically look around 360 degrees around your body and say, yeah, there's not any threat around me right now.
Mm-hmm. It really is, right? It's getting back into awareness, which I think it sounds like it's the most important thing in all of these things. So so talking about trauma and PTSD and all of that, that really is, a situation where we are basically stuck in reaction. We are stuck in that lower part of the brain that is responding or reacting to something that happened before we have a chance to say, actually, this is not necessarily what is happening right now. And I was listening to the book by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry. They have a really good book. It's called "What Happened to You," and they explain a little bit what you just explained about the parts of the brain that basically when you get triggered, it comes down to the lower part of the brain, and you get frozen there before it gets a chance to go. Maybe it doesn't never have a chance to go to the upper parts of the brain where you make sense of what just happened. And I use that to explain to some of my clients, some of the people I speak with, about how sometimes we can't, there's a stop in the healing because we have this triggering that basically brings us back to where we to that place where we used to be. And we definitely need to start unpacking it, and maybe in times where we're not being triggered, then we can go back there and see that, actually just put some more awareness into it. It's just such a fascinating conversation, and I know that anyone watching or listening, they will have their own example of something that they're still carrying with them, and maybe reacting, maybe responding, and maybe just going through that journey of getting back to themselves.
I think that's great that you mentioned that, because it can really lessen the shame that comes with saying, I'm not living my best life. I'm not doing what I know I should be doing. I'm not acting rationally, or I'm too manic or emotional or whatever it is. Biologically, that's not your fault. You don't have access to your rational brain right now when you're in that traumatized, triggered state. So the first thing is to relax the reptilian brain, relax the survival mechanism, and say that I'm not being chased by a saber-toothed tiger right now. There's not an assailant coming at me. I'm actually safe right now. Okay. Then, only then can healing really start to happen. And we can start to get access back to our rational brain and our sense of choice and decision-making and agency.
Yeah. I think it's been really fascinating to bring all of this, into the table and speak about it in a way that makes so much sense, and anyone listening or watching can really take it away and apply that to their own lives and situations. Before we say goodbye for today, what is one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, and one thing that you would really like our viewers to walk home with?
There's a few threads that came up in this conversation that I thought, oh, we could go that way, we could go this way. I'll just take a moment and see what wants to be said at this point in the conversation. Yeah, I think the thing that I want to say is that there's a principle in improv comedy or improv music called Yes and. And the idea is that in improv, somebody offers you something, and you walk into a scene and someone says, "Oh, thank God you're here, Grandma." Well, you don't say, "I'm not a grandma, I'm a teenager." You just say, "Okay, yes, I'm grandma, and I'm having a midlife crisis, and I'm actually have got a new mohawk." Whatever it is, you improvise, but you start off by saying yes to what the other characters are offering. Or if you're playing music, someone, the drummer starts playing a different beat. If you keep playing what you're playing, then you start going in different directions. But if you say, okay, yes to what the drummer's doing, and now I'm going to add my own flair and a different way to play with it, that's when improv really takes off and it gets very exciting, or it can get really funny. So there's also a mental health principle here of saying yes and. Yes and to the pain in our life, to the fact that we've had trauma. Yes, and yes, my parents didn't love me the way I needed them to. Raise your hand, everybody. That might be you. And I can love myself the way that I need to. And I'm learning how to love myself, and I'm learning how to love others, and I'm learning how to receive the love that I need in my life. Yes, I have this chronic illness and this chronic pain, and it puts a lot of limitations on my life, real limitations that I have real feelings, real sadness, and real pain about. And I'm still breathing, and I can also do this with my life. Given these limitations, I can also do this. So this principle of yes and, I find it very compassionate to say, yes, I acted in a way that I didn't like. I felt stuck in a way that I didn't want to feel for a long time. And so what's the and? We accept, we validate where we have been, where we are. And then as soon as we say, yes, this is where we are now, then we have choice of what we want to do next.
I love that. I love that. And I think there's so much growth that you bring to the table when you're willing to play this game, because you need to let go of all the resistance and the pain and the injustice that we kind of spoke about earlier, right? It's that thing of yes, I need to make a choice. and maybe that's it's very clear now that the choice needs to be made. I love it because I think it's resistance that you might have that you don't recognize that you have until you decide to try and play this kind of thing, and then you're like, oh, okay. So it was here all along. I just didn't pay attention. Dan, thank you. I loved our conversations. I think it brought so much wisdom and so many tools and tips for people to really be able to go away and use by themselves. You mentioned your audio course as well, and of course at the show notes I will share all your information so people can find out more about you, and of course get the course and learn more about resourcing. It sounds like a really fundamental thing that anyone should really, a tool that they have in their toolbox and use, whenever. Sounds like, we all have these moments that are coming along. So sounds like a really important one. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for your wisdom.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. It was such a pleasure and a joy to talk with you. And if anyone has any questions or wants to follow up or would like some support in any of this, you're welcome to reach out to me at my website. That'll integratedselfcounseling.org. It'll be in the notes. And that audio course is also, it's self-paced, so you can download it. There's guided meditations to bring in some of this resourcing feeling. And I hope that it supports you on your path, wherever you are in it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thanks, Anav.
Thank you.